That's why I don't, because I didn't have the privilege of being born black. I was born white, so there's a limit on what I can say.
We recently,
Please.
we put this on our social medias, and the whole world has been the whole world has been butthurt. So there's an infamous social media / he's not on YouTube because YouTube won't even allow his shit on the channel, but he's a talking head, Nick Fuentes. He's a known and admitted white supremacist and racist. He also visited Trump during the first term. People know him. He's not only is he an ass, but he's a racist. So let's make sure we get those descriptors out of the way. Okay?
Complete and total ass.
Complete. This young man went on a tirade the other day on Jason Whitlock. Essentially called Jason Whitlock a token.
And by the way, you are a token. Hey, Jason, you're a token. You are in conservative media as a black guy that can confer upon white people the dignity of not being called a racist for having their views. That's why you get paid. That's why I don't, because I didn't have the privilege of being born black. I was born white, so there's a limit on what I can say.
Said that Jason Whitlock is for lack of a better description, a grifter in conservative and white spaces. Literally, this is his words: a grifter and a token in white space, conservative white spaces that the community has intentionally brought in to say the things that white people cannot get away with saying. This is him saying this about Jason Whitlock. And Jason Whitlock's response to him ultimately was, I'm not mad at you for saying these things about me, but that you said these things about me and you lied on Jesus. That's why I'm mad. That was this nigga's response.
What?
He's mad at him.
What?
So the question, because of this situation, the question came to my mind: when do we, should we allow these black people that have, and I'm trying to be gentle here, these black people that have strayed from the community, should we ever allow them back in? Should we ever defend them? Another example is Candace Owens. Candace Owens, after being fired from the Blaze for having quote unquote anti-Semitic views, has been on this apology tour. She's been changing her tone as of recently in how she approaches talking about black people in the black community, which has been very fascinating to me. So once again, I got to ask the question: should we, if we ever should, allow these black people that have strayed from the community back into the community? Crush, I'm gonna let you go first, and then I'm gonna let L bang that, because me and L's. Oh, you know what? Before you go, Crush, L's usually not an optimistic person, and I think he's honestly tainted me in some capacity.
Yeah, I am the only optimist on the show.
Yeah, you might be, and I was optimistic too until I met L, and L was like, "Nah, everything's fucked up. That's why we got to be out in the street fighting for shit." Okay, I dig it, but L was one of the few people that I honestly heard say that we should allow these people back into the community, because I was of the mindset that no, throw all these niggas in the trash. And he's like, no, I think we're always far too quick to want to cut these people off.
Yeah.
And I've always thought that conversation's always been a fascinating one to me. But go ahead, Crush.
Yeah. I mean, look, these people, I'll be blunt, no. But it does beg a conversation on what the concept of conservatism is to the black community. There is a place for all points of view. I mean, every point of view has its own context, its own value, there's already a lot of conservative values in the black community already, right? Yeah. It's just intermingled with stratification, racism, and classism, and all this other bullshit.
Yeah, that's it. That's it.
You know, these are conservative values that are pretty much, you know, shoring themselves up psychologically, you know, to endure the bullshit they're dealing with. At least in terms of one outlook on the world. You know, this should be allowed to exist. You know, but when things, you know, when things stray into a, you know, severely judgmental and culturally, you know, draining attitude. When you're vilifying, children. You're crossing you're crossing into territory, that puts you that you forget that you're at risk at the same time, fool. So you can't be blind to the larger context of it. You can't be blind to our shared existence, and then that's what Black conservatism needs to do above all else. Acknowledge
to be blind to our current situation in the country.
Acknowledge our shared existence, and we can build from there, brother. Your conservative values are definitely good at protecting children to a certain extent. But then again, you have to know when to know when to draw the line on imposing will on other people. You have to know when to draw that fucking line. In religious education, in economic aspects, you have to know when to draw the line, on imposing your will on other people with your point of view. And that's the danger that these assholes like FriendSpace represent from day one. But I think we've seen the occasional Black conservative that sounds rational about the community. Their voices aren't amplified. In fact, they're probably pretty scared to try to articulate their view in a way that
to be balanced.
Because they know they feel they have the right intentions toward the Black community, right? And they just want to present their conservative values in a way that feels positive. I don't see it often. I think we might have seen it once or twice, but I think these people, no, bottom line. But it does beg the conversation of what Black conservatism is in the U.S. And that's a fair discussion to have at this point in our history. It's a fair discussion to have.
So but I want to make sure we got you on the record, Crush. You're saying that we should not allow Candace and or Whitlock back into the community. Is that what you're saying?
Affirmative.
L, go ahead, bro.
I've always been of the mindset, man, that we should always have the back door cracked open. It's been the analogy that I've used over the years, right? Now, I think we should have the back door cracked open for people who have not demonstrated overt ancestral treason, traitorous type behaviors, right? Those people, the door should be cracked open for, right? The door should be, it should be, they knock on the door, we can peek in, we can have a conversation like, who you looking for type of conversation. Like, when that person show up at the door, like, who you looking for?
Who you with?
Right? And based off of how you respond depends on whether we go get the gun or we go get the person that you're looking for in the house. I think there's that distinction there. But there are certain people who have committed such egregious, overt, intentional acts of traitorous, treacherous behavior that they are not allowed to come into the fold, right? Because they have a level of consistently, and we're not talking about people who have moved from the Detroit Red mentality to the Malcolm, because most of our people are in the Detroit Red position. Most of us have some idea that there is a system out there that is oppressing and causing us harm, but we're trying to make it through the system like Detroit Red. Most of us won't ever get to the Malcolm stage. Most of them won't get to the stage where they not only understand the system, but they're ready to go and do anything to destroy it by any means necessary.
So
our responsibility is
to find the rationale yet.
Yeah, our responsibility is not even to turn Detroit Reds into Malcolms. Our responsibility is to change the material conditions of the Detroit Reds, hoping that based off of what we do with them as a collective, that they change into the Malcolms. One is more concrete and can be more fulfilling and have less fall off. But if we just continue to try to convert and get people to think like us, we don't need a bunch of folks thinking the same. We need some people that are willing to take notes, take out the trash, watch the kids, watch the sheets, And then we need the folks who's the snipers. So there's a position for everybody within the battle, but those people such as the Whitlocks, the Jason Owens, and it's a host of other folks who are not coon adjacent, who are full-blown coon, who are not allowed back in the fold based off of their ancestral treason that they have demonstrated overtly for years.
So do you think that it is a prerequisite for Black conservatives to ignore racism to be a Black conservative?
No, but because I think conservatism in itself has been hijacked and co-opted long before woke was. So when we view conservatism, we view conservatism in the same frame and reference of Republican. We automatically assume
white Republicans, yes,
white Republicans specifically, that they are all overtly, intentionally racist, right?
Yeah.
While I do believe that Black folks in general have conservative-like views, I'm cautious about saying that we have conservative-like views, because the last thing I want people to hear is that we think like white people, that we are trying to do the things, because I think far more dangerous to our community and conservatives are liberals, Black and white. They the motherfuckers that we should be getting rid of. Conservatives have, but to be clear, that word has been co-opted.
No. I want you to go back on that and elaborate more, because I think that is a conversation that we're not having enough. Is the place that liberalism the place that liberalism has in white supremacy too, because far too often we find ourselves ignoring the racism that comes from white liberals. I mean, Get Out had a perfect example of that in the very fucking beginning of the movie.
Very beginning of the movie.
Come on. So I mean, I think so.
All of our great leaders, whether it be in Fannie Lou, Ella Baker, Dr. King, Malcolm, one of their chief warnings to the Black community was liberalism, white and Black. Dr. King was probably more adamant and staunch and angry towards white liberals than even Brother Malcolm. Yep. He was clearly stating that these are the people who will watch the atrocities take place and say, oh my God, that's a horrible atrocity, weep over the atrocity, but turn and go about their business. That's what liberals do. Liberals are very much, I feel, individualistic. They are prototypical. They will be your modern white ally. They'll be the one who says, I identify with what you guys are going through. But what we don't need white liberals or Black liberals. We need co-conspirators. We need people who are going to get into the fight and destroy shit. But liberalism is the thing that we get all of our reforms from. And while, again, to be clear, reforms in and of itself are not bad. But when the reform is the end game, that's where things get tricky. Reforms can be a direction, a lead into the destruction and the replacement of a thing. But when reforms are just the thing that we are looking to do, that's where liberals come in. Liberals are typically the ones who are going to come up with your programs to allow Black and brown kids to have certain advantages, but they're never
make
going
those
to
changes around the margins. They never make the whole
around the edges.
They never really try to distribute.
Yeah, they're the people who are going to eat the crust of the pizza, but never get in the middle and eat the cheese and get messy and get the grease dripping. They're going to take the little bites out of the crust.
Or in other words, they're like that old couple next at the pond throwing crumbs into the lake. They're just throwing out crumbs, right?
Yeah, but that's what a lot of our movements have become. Is very liberal. Liberalism is a huge concern, incremental problem within our community in many ways.
Incremental.
I think is liberalism the essence of incremental change.
It's incrementalism. That's its core. That's it.
From Obama on down.
Incrementalism. That sounds terrifying.
Listen, from
it
Obama on
literally-
down, it's always been those. They've always had people in place to make those incremental changes, those changes
Incremental
along the
changes.
margins that don't really holistically change
So-
anything. And that's been
so
the
liberalism-
challenge. Is that
That's what nonprofits are.
So liberalism
Nonprofits
is
in
just
most
bad.
cases are
another
those
pacifier.
things.
it's hard for me to welcome someone back like the Candace Owenses, like the Jason Whitlocks, like the Tim Scotts, people that will blatantly tell you in one breath that that racism doesn't exist in this country. And then in another breath, when something happens, then also cry racism like Tim Scott did after he didn't go anywhere with his presidential election.
I mean, is it completely impossible to redeem Candace Owens? I mean, she said some horrible shit.
She has.
She said
She has. She says.
Well, you can be you can be
was
completely redeemed and still not be invited in.
no. You can't be completely redeemed. Well, let me take a step back. I don't think that there is there's the redemption portion can only start when the
With
perpetrator
self-sacrifice.
when the perpetrator acknowledges a wrong.
Yeah, was done. That wrong was done.
Shut up. Yes, when the perpetrator acknowledges a wrongdoing and says that they will repent or not do it. That's the only way the redemption can happen. But these people are not.
The
They're
redemption
not
has to be as loud as the offense.
Exactly.
You have the same way you went hard in the paint to act like a full-blown
so,
coon.
So she's not
you
really
go hard in the paint
So
to
So
basically,
Ms. Owens isn't really addressing her past here. She's just trying to move forward and
she's just trying to move. She's exactly because she sure as hell has not apologized for all of the comments that she made about fucking George Floyd. Like that was really where she started to blow up for real was when she started making these comments about George Floyd. Yeah. And I know she has not apologized.
No, she hasn't.
And I don't think that she will. You know,
I don't think she will.
And to be fair, I don't expect her to. I'm not saying.